Well, tonight, a mesmerizing look at one of the most distressed nations on earth, a battered, run-down society hidden from the world for nearly half a century, a land of such endless misery that its people are fleeing at every opportunity. Tens of thousands have already left. Incredibly, this isolated, impoverished nation is in the heart of Europe. It's communist Albania. And tomorrow, U.S. Secretary of State James Baker will make history by visiting there.
Mr. Baker will be the first Secretary of State to visit Albania in nearly 50 years. His trip comes in response to the massive social and political upheaval of the past 4 months. Tom Jarrell and a 2020 team were recently among the first U.S. broadcast journalists to visit Albania in decades. Albania is situated in southeastern Europe. Italy is to the west, and the two nations are separated by some 90 miles of the Adriatic Sea. Tom's two-part report begins in Albania.
On the Adriatic Sea, here in the port city of Durrës, 25,000 people vanished nearly overnight.
I have 3 uncles, but they are not here now. I'm worried for them.
They fled Albania by the tens of thousands, defying authorities who tried to stop them with deadly force. Ships of all sizes were commandeered in the port as people demanded to be taken to freedom in nearby Italy, a desperate bid for political asylum.
What do you tell the children about where their father has gone? How do you explain to them?
My daughter asked me, "Why are you crying? Daddy's gone away, but he'll come back again." The little one asks for him every day. "Where's Daddy? Where's Daddy?"
There had been no time to say goodbye in the feverish effort to escape, split-second decisions that tore families apart. As word of the exodus spread, parents were stunned to learn children as young as 10 had fled with their classmates.
His room is just like he left it. I haven't touched one thing. I get through the day all right, but at night it's very hard. That's when it hits me he's gone.
The human tidal wave fleeing Albania this past year totaled more than 80,000 people. When the world saw scenes of this chaotic exodus, it raised the big unanswered question: what were they fleeing from? Albania stands today as a disgraceful monument of communism's biggest failure, a country in economic shambles, a nation facing political revolution. Here, 3.5 million people found themselves trapped in a country that isolated them from the outside world and oppressed them at every turn.
Since the Communist Party took over, I have not seen one good day. My entire life has passed me by. As long as I can remember, they have suppressed me. And not only me, but everyone.
Led by dictator Enver Hoxha, Albania rejected not only the capitalist West, but the Soviet Union and China as well. Alone against the world, Albania became the most dogmatic country in all Europe. Under stringent government controls, Albanians couldn't get out, outsiders couldn't get in. The veil of secrecy was lifted this year for the first time since 1946, a sign that Europe's last bastion of communism is ready to change its hostile image.
But most of what are these curious little domes you see in fields all over this country?
2020 obtained one of the first visas issued to an American news team.
In the military languages, they are called bunkers. They are built for the protection of the Cold War that never came in our country.
To reassure and defend the people?
Yes.
The bunkers are everywhere, gun-slotted concrete domes, militarily obsolete from the beginning.
So they've left you with a very expensive playground.
Of course, and now they are called by the people mushrooms because only the kids are playing on them.
Equally bizarre, the air defense system. In every vineyard, we found sharp metal stakes installed to prevent enemy soldiers from parachuting into the country.
Can we interview the Prime Minister?
Yes.
Are there any restrictions on what
It's been such a long time since foreign journalists were allowed inside Albania. The government is uncertain how to handle interview requests.
What is the financial problem?
What is the financial problem? We ask for an interview for a prime minister, some $100.
$100 you want to charge for?
$500.
$500 for an interview?
After explaining American television doesn't pay government officials for interviews, we were taken inside to Prime Minister Fatos Nano.
As far as the mass exodus of people from the port at Durrës, what were they telling you? Were they saying we've had enough and we're leaving?
Well, one has to consider that the present-day realities in Albania result in a general impatience for improving the situation.
They've waited for 45 years.
Well, I think things are changing very quick.
But 5 decades of hardline Stalinist rule have left most of Albania reeling. Religion was banned here, so were lawyers, blue jeans, cars, and Americans.
No American's ever been in this village, according to the people here. None of them has ever seen an American before, today.
We found Andrew Natsios leading the first American disaster relief team ever allowed inside Albania. Here now to assess the nation's desperate need for food and medicine.
The disaster this country is facing is not a natural disaster, but a man-made one.
Albania has been called the poorest country in Europe. Is it meeting those expectations?
It certainly is. It is the poorest country in Europe, clearly.
This veteran team of American doctors and analysts, people who routinely work in the Third World, were astounded by the backwardness of Albania.
The country itself is somewhere around 1910, 1900.
1910? Are things that backward?
In some respects, they certainly are. It is a time warp. There's no question about it.
As we crisscrossed the country, we found scenes that were a throwback to another era. Transportation is primitive. Ox carts and horse-drawn wagons are commonplace. Even in the capital of Tirana, the few cars seen on the streets are owned by the government. Rush hour here is on foot. People walk everywhere. Often the limits of their social and economic life depend on how far they can walk in a day. The misery level in Albania is high for everyone. Mylenda Gorja is a college-educated woman whose husband has a good job, but that doesn't help her when it comes to shopping.
No fruits, no apples, no bananas, well, no vegetables.
It must be very frustrating for you. Let's see what else we can find.
At the milk store, the door was padlocked.
They're closed now. This is their schedule when they're open?
Yes, this shop is open at 3 in the morning.
3 a.m.? What time do you have to get here?
We must awake in 2 o'clock in the morning, and they must...
You get up at 2.
Yeah, 2.
You get online at 2. They open at 3.
Yeah.
How long will you stand online to get milk?
For 1, 2, 3 hours. It is entitled The Killer of Sleep Milk.
After all their trouble, the milk they end up with is powdered. Empty shelves are just one reminder of the broken promises the people here are facing. This hospital is for malnourished children, an inevitable problem in a country where food is scarce. But here in Albania, 1/3 of the babies are hospitalized every year. They'll treat them as best they can, which by modern standards is terrifying. Diapers, as we know them, are non-existent. Cotton scraps of cloth are jerry-rigged around the babies with lengths of cord. The entire laundry for this hospital is washed by hand and hung outside on every available bush and fence to dry. Most alarming, the syringes here are used over and over. Experts fear an AIDS outbreak could spread like wildfire. We travel through remote Albania. 65% of the population live in mountain villages or on government-run farms. Here we found rows of young women doing back-breaking labor, plowing hundreds of acres of farmland by hand, work done in most countries by farm animals or machines.
$100 in a day.
Sprissa is 17. Her mother also worked these fields.
Is there something else? You are an attractive young woman. Is there something else you would like to do besides work in the field?
I want to be a dancer.
As we left, our translator whispered that the girl had been too afraid to tell us the truth. She's paid just 50 cents for a 12-hour day. Years of government intimidation have left workers fearful of saying or doing the wrong thing. Until last year, making the sign of the cross was enough to get one arrested in Albania. Father Ubiani was one of hundreds of priests rounded up by the Communist Party. He spent 26 years in the notorious Burrell prison. Opera singer Luka Kachai was arrested and sent to a labor camp because he refused to stop singing foreign operas like Mozart and Beethoven.
I was sentenced to death without any witnesses, without an investigation. I didn't have a lawyer.
Drita Kasturi was a young woman in 1946 when she was declared an enemy of the people and jailed without explanation. She was freed this year at the age of 71.
I can never forget the torture, the physical beatings. They tortured us with electrical devices and beat us on our bare feet. We had no food or water. It went on day and night. The pain, I can't forget for a single day.
This year, in response to international pressure, the Albanian government released more than 1,000 political prisoners. Their stories shocked the outside world.
They knew a lot of people who had died over the years, who had been tortured to death, who had been pushed over mountainsides, who had been killed during work in the mines.
This March, Bjorn Elmquist led a delegation from the Helsinki Federation for Human Rights to investigate Albania's prisons for the first time. The team declared them subhuman.
They compare to a place where you could let animals live. Pigs might stay there, perhaps.
Elmquist's team photographed the abuses they found.
And here we see examples of mutilation, where people have lost arms, hands, because of torture. The worst crime you can commit in a country which has a communist regime is to be against the philosophy. And therefore, if you're against it, you must either be a very dangerous criminal or you must be insane, because you don't realize how happy you ought to be to live in such a paradise.
But this paradise was turning sour. Last summer, thousands stormed foreign embassies in Albania's capital, pleading for exit visas. People fleeing a society run on terror, a nation without food or jobs. 5,000 got out. Those left behind were caught up in a wave of rebellion. A new political movement emerged and swept across Albania. The Democratic Party is led by Dr. Sali Berisha, a charismatic cardiologist. As more and more people took to the streets, the Albanian government caved in. Free elections would be held for the first time in 66 years, they promised. The people would be able to choose. But the Communist Party controlled the countryside where the majority of the voters lived. When the votes were counted, the Communist Party had won by a landslide. The cities exploded in protest, charging election fraud.
2 days after the elections, violence broke out here in the city of Shkodra. 4 people were killed, including a Democratic Party leader. Enraged, the crowd set the communist headquarters on fire. It was a daring break for people who had been dominated by half a century of Stalinism.
While we were in Shkodra, the city was still in turmoil over the killings the day before. They savored the smoking ruins, their moment of independence and defiance. They systematically destroyed everything they could find in the hated headquarters of the Communist Party: files, records, and dossiers.
We keep records on you and you and you.
For the first time, people like Ilez Dresti had risen up and attacked the institution that has oppressed them all their lives.
When we entered the building, we found all sorts of foods we couldn't even dream of. Pasta from Italy, food and whiskey and luxury items that were not available to the general public.
Are you no longer afraid? This is the Communist Party headquarters.
I'm not afraid. I would give up my life in order to get rid of the Communist Party. The Communists have taken away our culture, they've taken away the dignity of all the people, they completely destroyed the entire population.
Across town, the funeral of one of those shot by the police was a mixture of anguish and politics. The victim, 42-year-old Nazim Kriyaju, the father of two. An ordinary citizen had become a political martyr. Even his grieving family couldn't conceal their hope that this death might lead to political change. During the cortege, the size of the crowd continued to grow, filling the streets. The authorities were nowhere to be seen. In a country where freedom of expression had been denied for decades, every hand was raised with the sign of freedom. The funeral ended peacefully, but then gunfire erupted. The police had again opened fire on the crowd. The crowd angrily told us that an undercover policeman had been spotted near the smoldering party headquarters.
He had a rifle. I think, like, is that pushka? Check, is that? He had a rifle. And he was inside. He was sent from the police.
What's going to happen? You stand out here and the police shoot at you from across the park.
Don't you think that is tragic? All the world must know what is happening here.
The killings here in Skodra triggered violence across the country, riots in the streets, and hunger strikes. The long road to democracy brought Albania to a standstill.
What we've seen then are the conditions that set the stage for the mass exodus of Albanian citizens to Italy, many of whom were forced to leave loved ones behind. When we come back, how they're escaping. And Tom Gerald tracks down relatives who've been separated by the tumultuous events that are still unfolding in Albania, the land time forgot.
Oh boy, his future in Albania is so bleak. He left his parents and bolted for freedom across the sea. You'll meet that child in a moment, along with some of his countrymen who also made a desperate escape.
In part one of Tom Gerald's report on Albania, we saw a nation that seemed caught in a time warp. But even as we speak, a great social and political awakening continues. So too, an exodus. It is Italy, across the Adriatic Sea, that they think holds promise for Albanians seeking a new life. In recent months, Italian port towns such as Brindisi have seen Albanians arrive by the thousands. Tom's report continues.
The arrival in Brindisi was as chaotic as the lives they had abandoned so abruptly back in Albania. As wave after wave of refugees landed, Italian authorities tried to prevent them from getting off the ships, but desperation prevailed. There was no stopping the Albanians from reaching the freedom they had only dreamed of. They scrambled ashore every way they could. Entire families had fled with only their children, leaving jobs, money, and clothing behind. They arrived with no regrets.
When I put my foot in Italy, that was the first time that I was free in all my life.
They thought they were fleeing to paradise. They thought they would be looked after, and that was by no means the case when they came to Italy. They created big problems.
The Italian government had been caught unprepared by the flood of refugees. 25,000 Albanians, some hungry and sick, spilled out onto the docks with no place to go. Exhausted from the trip, many needed immediate medical attention. The rest were confined to the port while the authorities debated over what to do with these uninvited visitors.
There was no food and there was no water, and the people were suffering. It was very cold and we had no blankets.
Night after night, thousands of refugees slept in the rain under sheets of plastic. Despair in Albania had been exchanged for despair in another country. Frustration built to a breaking point.
Mothers are worried about their children. Why doesn't somebody help us? This place is worse than Albania.
Back in Albania, anxious relatives waited for word that their loved ones had made it across the sea safely. On just one street in the city of Durrës, we found virtually every family had lost someone in the exodus. This mother showed us a faded photo of her 17-year-old son, Samir. I don't know if he's alive or dead, she told us. If you go to Italy, please try to find him for me.
Okay, that's good.
We photographed family after family who were missing children from the exodus. Susanna Digley's 12-year-old son, Irvin, was one of the youngest to rebel in a moment and flee.
When he left, I felt as if someone had ripped my heart out. But I want him to study the violin and have a better life. I don't want to stand in his way.
Irvin's mother, like every parent we spoke with, wants her son to remain in Italy. El Panici was 6 months pregnant when her husband left her with 2 small children to try to find a job in Italy. A dog-eared photo is the only reminder daughter Angela has of her father. In his frantic effort to escape, he didn't have time to say goodbye.
When did you see your husband last? Did he say anything before he left?
No, nothing.
Albania is a very hard nation to leave and a very difficult nation to return to after you've left. Do you fear you'll never see him again?
I'm worried about him. I don't know where he is. I don't even have an address to write to him. If you see him in Italy, tell him to send me a letter so I know how he is. I can't live like this. The children ask for him constantly.
El Panici is waiting for her husband to somehow find a way to send for her and the children. But it's nearly impossible to obtain an exit visa. Even now, 3 months after the explosive exodus last March, armed soldiers surround the perimeter of the port. This gateway to freedom in the West is closed. For now, the families left behind are forced to live in dilapidated concrete housing projects. Many don't even have running water. The Simony family is considered middle class, but they can't afford a refrigerator or a telephone. Cooking is done on a wood-burning stove.
It's impossible to live this way. So many people living in this one home. My husband and myself, our 2 married sons and their wives, our 3 grandchildren. My oldest son couldn't marry because we didn't have room for his bride. There were 10 of us.
10 people? How many rooms do you have?
Only 2. That's why my son Pascal fled to Italy. His brother Kostadin went too and took his 4-year-old son.
Left behind was Kostadin's wife and infant daughter.
And what was your reaction? Your husband is left with your son?
I cried, but I wasn't angry. He went there in search of happiness for us.
We traveled to Italy to search for the missing family members and see how the refugees were doing 1 month after their escape. This is where many now live, makeshift tent cities set up by the Italian government. Authorities have not yet decided who will qualify for political asylum and who will be sent back to Albania. Until that decision is made, they wait. Few speak Italian, making it difficult to find a job in a country with unemployment problems of its own. But despite the problems they're facing here, the response is unanimous when asked if they're glad to be out of Albania.
Now we live in a tent, but it is better to live in a tent than in Albania.
There is more food here than most of these people have seen in a lifetime in Albania. More than 2,000 people live in this one camp. But we were unable to find any of the missing relatives we were seeking. We left this camp and headed 3.5 hours north to another refugee camp. We'd been told Irving Digley, the 12-year-old violinist, had been sent here. He's one of a handful of children living in this camp. Alone in a strange country, he's been forced to confront the consequences of his decision to leave without his family.
I know my parents are worried about me, but I wanted to leave. Only children of Communist Party members prosper in Albania. I have my entire life to look forward to here. The schools are better here in Italy.
As the other refugees crowded around, we gave Irvin the photograph we had taken of his family back in Albania and told him his parents wished him well. For now, his future remains uncertain. His violin was left at home. He spends his days listening to music on a borrowed radio and trying to learn Italian. We traveled on to Lisanello. There, among the refugees, we passed around the family photographs we'd taken back in Albania. Within moments, the Simony brothers were recognized. We were directed to a church just a few miles away, where we found them. Pascal, Constantine, and his 4-year-old son are doing better than most. Their biggest worry is being deported. Both have found menial jobs, taking the only work available. They send their paychecks home to Albania.
I'm a family man more than anything else. Right now I'll work anywhere and do anything to earn enough money to send back to my parents in Albania. I just want to bring my wife Morella and baby daughter here so that we can all be a family again.
For this close-knit family, the photographs of Constantine's wife Morella and 1-month-old baby brought smiles of delight until the reality set in. They may never see their aging parents again. It was too much for Pascal. As things now stand, there's little hope the Simony family will be together again soon. The Albanian government continues to guard its port with tanks, while the Italian government has clamped down on the constant stream of refugees. But some Albanians are now resorting to extraordinary measures. Just this week, crude homemade rafts were spotted off the Italian shore. They had floated 90 miles on empty oil drums, lashed together, only to be caught and forced to return to Albania. Their pathetic bid for freedom had failed.
Oh, Tom, it's pictures of boat people all over again.
It's certainly sad, yes.
Our Secretary of State is going to Albania tomorrow. Why? What is he trying to achieve?
He wants to encourage the new leaders of Albania to continue to move toward democratic reforms and offer them very limited U.S. aid if they will.
Is he going to do anything to help unite these families?
As far as we know, that's not on his agenda.
Well, are things getting better in Albania? And if they are, why are people still leaving?
Living conditions aren't getting better that fast, Barbara, but the spirit of freedom we saw everywhere, and they can't put that genie back in the bottle. Eventually, that will lead to improvements.
But for these people who are now separated, things look as if they'll get worse.
They don't look good. You're absolutely right, because Italy is threatening to send them back to Albania next month if they don't qualify for political asylum. They'll be back to square one.
It's an amazing report, especially being able to get those photographs and show them to the families. Welcome home, and thank you for this.
Thank you. Well, coming up, a problem of a far different sort. The perils of people who...
Have you ever walked in your sleep? Or when you think of sleepwalkers, what comes to mind? Well, folklore in Hollywood had given us images of people walking around like zombies, their arms stretched out in front of them, their eyes glazed. But as John Stossel reported here last year, real-life sleepwalkers can seem very much awake, with their eyes open, talking, even eating. It's weird, it's potentially dangerous, but help exists. So tonight, a reprise of John's report, and we'll let you know if some of the sleepwalkers we met before are still at it.
This is what researchers say is the most common form of sleepwalking. Just sitting up or talking or screaming. It's most prevalent in children. This kind of screaming is called night terrors. It's awful for the parents, who naturally believe their child's going through something horrible and damaging. But the experts say, just let the child go through it. Don't try to wake her. They claim this will have no permanent effect on the child.
It's probably a manifestation of an immature brain that will mature with time, and the children don't remember it the next day, so there's really no psychological trauma. They have no memory of it.
Dr. Carlos Schenk helps run the Minnesota Regional Sleep Disorder Center in Minneapolis. Hours of videotaping people in sleep labs has taught him and other scientists that sleepwalking includes singing and eating and talking in your sleep.
Wait. No.
All these behaviors are relatively common. It becomes a problem only when it disturbs your sleep so much that you're tired during the day, or if your sleep behavior is so extreme that you become a threat to someone, or a threat to yourself. Some 10 years ago, researchers at this sleep lab noticed that they were seeing lots of people who had injured themselves. Were you surprised at what you started seeing?
We were very surprised. From the textbooks, we had read that sleepwalking and the bumps in the night are really in the domain of children. And we started seeing adults of every age, including older adults in their 60s and 70s, who would walk around, jump around, go through windows.
What happened? 3 years ago, Marv Olson cracked his neck and cut himself badly by jumping right through this bedroom window. Fortunately, it was on the first floor.
It's like I was shot out the window.
And this is a storm window. This is 2 panes of glass. It's a lot to go through.
2 panes of glass and a screen this time.
You went right through.
It's amazing that I didn't wake up then.
He had blood running down his face, and he was holding his head, and he had one of the drapes from his room wrapped around him, and I could just see the whites of his eyes.
At the hospital, they told him to get one of these restraining jackets so he could tie himself to the bed. No one suggested a sleep clinic. For years, people have tried to control sleepwalkers by tying them up, or, as in this case, putting barbed wire around the bed. An inventor in Maine actually patented this technique. They thought such steps were necessary because they assumed sleepwalkers were possessed or insane. Now doctors say it's not really a psychological problem. It's a physical disorder, and we can treat it. Now, there are 2 basic stages of sleep, non-dream and dream sleep. Most sleepwalking occurs during the deeper non-sleep. Some people, no uncertain why, during that stage, start to act as if they're awake.
So you're in this twilight zone of being half awake, half asleep, really out of it, but you're able to move around, and your eyes can see, but you have poor judgment. So it's really a twilight state.
Now, a few sleepwalkers do walk while they're dreaming. This is unusual because when most of us dream, our brain sends out a mysterious signal that paralyzes our muscles. With some sleepwalkers, the paralyzing mechanism doesn't work, and therefore they may act out their dreams. This happens most often with older men, like Mel Abel. For 11 years, he sleepwalked. Often his wife had to lead him back to bed.
Lots of times I found him over by the window there, I think he was going to go out on the balcony and jump off or something. I don't know.
Mel has hurt himself sleepwalking many times, usually by leaping out of bed. One time you jumped all the way over to this dresser?
Many times over the years.
Tell me about that.
I couldn't do it if I tried now, but I'd be laying down there, and I'd take a loop, make a regular loop, and go head first into something. And I laid on the floor for a while, and oh, did that hurt. And I couldn't come to for a little while.
Did you try to get help?
I went to, I don't know how many different doctors, and they tried different medications. And finally the doctor told me, he says, that there isn't anything else I can do for you.
Again, no one suggested a sleep clinic. Mel ended up wearing a belt, which he then tied to the bedpost.
This saved a lot of teeth and a lot of skin on my head from jumping. Whoops.
So this worked?
This worked. But I thought, isn't this a heck of a way to live?
Sandy Seacon is fortunate to be getting help while she's young.
Okay, I'm placing the electrode on the mastoid behind your right ear. It's a little gold disc.
At the clinic, they attach electrodes to just about every part of her body. This way, they can monitor her brain waves, her heart rate, her eye movements, all the things that go on while she sleeps. The purpose of this is to rule out other physical problems. Only then will they address the sleepwalking. They can help?
Yeah.
What will they do?
I'm not sure yet. Hopefully find out what's wrong with me, maybe give me some medication to help me sleep.
Would that be good? I mean, what?
Anything would be better than what's happening now. Yeah.
What's thing now is that she's trying to go to college and work full-time at this deli to pay for it. But she can barely do that because sleepwalking at night makes her so tired during the day. You'd be tired, too, if you spent your nights doing what she does.
I'll walk around the house. I beat up my room. I take things off the walls.
What do you mean, beat up your room?
I don't know. I just go crazy, and I hit whatever's in my way. I break things. I take everything off the walls and put them on the floor.
One night, she ripped her bedroom door right off its hinges.
My dad came downstairs and he asked me what I was doing, and I said, I'm not sure, and I put it against the wall and I went back to bed.
But normally you wouldn't be strong enough to do that.
Right.
So something happens in your sleep that really changes you.
Yeah, it's like you're a different person.
The brain can get so energized in sleep that it is capable of generating behaviors that people cannot do while they're awake. It's amazing. Superhuman strength.
Yet while your body may be working well, your mind probably isn't. Sleepwalkers often display very poor judgment. For example, sometimes they eat strange things.
They can make cat food sandwiches, salt sandwiches, butter their cigarettes, put on 3 or 4 sets of clothing at a time, or walk out into the snow in the winter when it's 20 below zero in Minnesota without any clothes on.
Does this scare you?
Yeah, I'm afraid to go to sleep at night. And I'm afraid I'm going to hurt myself. I was walking in my sleep one night, and I'm not sure what I was kicking, but I hurt my foot really bad, and I thought it was broken. So I had to go to the hospital and get it x-rayed, and then he referred me here to the clinic.
Once the electrodes are attached, Sandy is sent to bed. She'll spend the next 2 nights here. She probably won't sleepwalk, she says, because as far as she knows, she sleepwalks only once every week or 2. In any case, the camera will record what she does. And what did she do? Well, 1 hour into the first night, Sandy screams. Other patients complained it woke them up. But Sandy never woke up. Did you sleepwalk last night here?
I'm not sure what I did last night.
Well, I can tell you because I just watched the tape that you sat up, screamed, and went right back down. Do you remember that?
Not at all.
The experts say that's typical. It's like getting a phone call in the middle of the night. You may be able to carry on a coherent conversation, but do you remember any of it the next morning? Probably not. That's one reason the camera's helpful, to convince sleepwalkers that they really do what they do. On Sandy's second night, she stands up and almost hurts herself. A technician runs in to check on her.
You going somewhere?
Sandy never wakes up. She just settles back into bed. Now, sleepwalking like this can be dangerous not just to the sleepwalker, but also to others. One night, Mel dreamed he was wrestling a deer and had to break its neck.
I'll just put one hand under your chin like this and one up here, and then give you a snap like that and snap the neck, you know. But when I put my hand up here, she jumped out of bed and hollered and said, "What in the world are you trying to do?"
When he even touched me now, and he goes, "Do that." It just scares me. I mean, I went through it a lot with his dreams, but this time he just was going to, I thought, choke me. And I jumped up and I said, "What in the devil are you doing?"
Well, I came to right away, and I just sat there for about a minute. And then I started crying. I thought, oh, my God, I could have broke her neck and killed her.
Which brings us to the question, what should you do if you or someone you know sleepwalks? Well, the experts say if it happens only once or twice, there's no need to go to a sleep lab. Should you wake the sleepwalker?
No, I would redirect the sleepwalker back to bed.
Why not wake them up?
If someone is in the midst of an agitated episode, you can get socked in the face trying to wake them up. So it's better to duck and try to have them get back to bed.
Then, if it keeps happening, get to a sleep lab. Evaluation will cost about $1,000 to $2,000, but the labs can help. Most give patients a small dose of a tranquilizer or sleeping pill. At higher doses, the drugs can make you drowsy and can be addictive. But the doctors say under medical supervision, they're safe, and they usually work instantly. It's now 2 months since Sandy went to the clinic. She says she feels like a new person.
Before I would never wake up like before noon, and now I wake up without an alarm clock like at 7 or 8 a.m. Once in a while I'll talk in my sleep and walk, but very seldom.
The medication worked for Marv as well. After 50 years of sleepwalking, he hasn't walked once since he started taking the drug. And Mel?
It's a miracle. I still dream, but my dreams are altogether different. I maybe shouldn't be saying this. I get to thinking that I'm back to 17 or 18. I wake up in the morning and I thought, oh, gee, that was only a dream.
John, how are Mel and Sandy doing now?
Very well. Mel says it's like a whole new world. He's much more awake during the day since he started taking the drug. Sandy has sleepwalked twice in the past 2 years. Both times she'd forgotten to take her pill. So the medicine works.
Mel said that he nearly killed his wife, and I've forgotten. Did anyone ever actually kill someone while they were asleep?
People have killed. Now, whether they were really sleepwalking or just trying to stay out of jail is hard to know, but it's been used as a defense in murder trials about a dozen times. In one case, a man drove 14 miles, broke into his mother-in-law's house, stabbed her to death. The jury heard testimony that he had a history of sleepwalking and that he liked his mother-in-law, and so they acquitted him.
Amazing. Thank you, John.
Oh.
Wait.
Well, coming up, a man who's trying to wake up the Soviet Union. We're not talking about Mikhail Gorbachev, but Boris